My name is Erica Schwegman. I am the Associate Director of Membership and Marketing here at Allied Construction Industries. We are absolutely so happy to be bringing this CEO event to you guys virtually. I know that you guys have hung in there with us with all of the changes that we've had and with COVID. We are so excited, if nothing else, virtually to see you guys. We're hoping later this fall, we have another CEO event in progress right now. We're hoping it can be in person, but we'll see. As you guys know, today you guys are going to be hearing from Melissa with the Port and Brandy from 3CDC. Before we begin, I just want to remind you all to please stay muted throughout the Zoom meeting and use the chat feature. Like if you scroll over your screen, the chat feature is at the bottom. It's a little message bubble, so you guys can hit that and you can send messages to specific people or to the whole group. So I will be helping Jen and Al with the Q&A portion later. Panelists, please note if you guys do have a question, please let us know who the question is for if it's not for both of the individuals. We'll do our best to cover all of your questions in the hour that we have together. And with that, I would like to introduce the two sponsors for today. We have Miss Jen Homer, who has been with us for a long time here at ACI and helping us with different benefits. And she is with Strategic Benefits, so thank you for sponsoring. And then we have Alvin Rohr with the Rohr Agency, who's newer to ACI, but has been working with many of you for a really long time. So with that, I'm going to completely turn over to Jen and Al to get us started.
Well, great. Thank you, Erica. Both Alvin and I are really excited to host our first virtual event. For those of you that I've met over the years, you know I would much rather be having a glass of wine, maybe on Schaefer's patio or at Eddie Merlot's. But you know what? I'm grateful for the time together. We've all had to kind of muddle through COVID. And I do appreciate, Erica, everything ACI has done to kind of keep us abreast of updates, knowledge, things that we needed to know during COVID. I know it's a challenge because being the partner at a benefits firm, it has been crazy. I remember the day we kind of decided to work from home thinking, oh, what could happen? And a lot happened. So it's just exciting to see everyone. And hopefully, like you said, this fall we'll be outside somewhere, just enjoying a glass of wine or a beer. But until then, and we didn't tell you guys, dogs and kids are welcome to the event. For those of us that may not be able to control those things. So anyway, well, I'll turn it over to you now, Al.
Well, thank you. I agree with the wine and the beer. We haven't missed out on that. That's the one thing that we're all got in common right now. We're also excited to be a co-sponsor on this thing. The last 3 months have been crazy for all of us, and I agree completely. I don't know what's next, but I think we're all going to learn a lot from what we've been through, and we're going to all run our businesses better. And hopefully we'll all be back open and be out on the patios having our favorite cocktails. And but I don't want to take a lot of your time. I wanted to introduce our two stars today. We've got Brandy Del Favero. Is that right? Okay, you're shaking your head. I'm close.
Close.
And Melissa Johnson from the Port, and Brandy's from the 3CDC. And when Jen and I were talking about this, we were just saying that we know all the things that you guys are doing, but I think a lot of people might not be sure of all the things that you're doing. So hopefully this will enlighten us and let us know what's going on in town and all the great things you guys are doing. And I'm really interested in hearing more about how this is affecting you guys in the city. So it'll be real interesting to hear your stories. So with no further ado, Brandy, why don't you take over right now?
Thanks, Alvin, Jen, and Erica. I'm very excited to be presenting today. My name's Brandy Del Favero. I'm a development manager here at 3CDC. I was excited to see that several of you I know I have business relationships with, and for those of you that I haven't interacted with before, I hope maybe our paths come cross each other in the future. So I've worked for 3CDC for many years, since 2009. I started working with 3CDC on Washington Park renovation as an owner's representative, which is really what made me decide that I wanted to work for an owner versus a general contractor. I loved my general contracting experience. I loved working with the subcontractors, But once I had an opportunity to interact with 3CDC, I had a chance to see what they were implementing in Over the Rhine, and I just knew that I had to be a part of it. So that's just a little bit about myself. We can start clicking through the slides. I'm sure several of you have seen the 45-minute long presentation with over 100 slides. This one is much condensed and hopefully is also targeted on future work and what's happening with COVID-19. We are focused specifically in Over the Rhine and the Central Business District. That's what makes our improvements and our progress so unique and specialized, is because you can really see the impact. You can go to the next slide. Like any community development organization, we focus on managing great civic spaces, mixed use development, preserving historic structures, and mixed income neighborhoods. So to date, we have invested over $1.4 billion of total development, and you can see the breakdown in the above slide. And that's resulted in over 166 buildings restored, 1,333 apartments. You can kind of see the stats here. I won't go through all of them, but we've really had some great progress since 2004. So when in our inception, the first thing we started doing was land banking, and these were the type of properties that we were land banking. They were properties where people just completely disregarded and moved out and left all of their trash in and were in desperate need of some major clean out and restoration. Just some other slides of what some of those properties looked like. You can see a lot of breezeways within those historic buildings, which was also hard to monitor and keep safe as we started to take those over. The first thing we did was boarded things up and made sure they were clean. So within the Over the Rhine area, there's 740 million of redevelopment that's been just in that specific area. Some quick before and afters. You know, we find that people that are participating in our presentations always love to see these. This is Washington Park. It was previously a parking lot, and then we created the below grade garage with the green space on top. This is at the corner of 12th and Vine. This is what it was like, you know, many, many years ago. And you can see the after photo now, which truly shows what we're about, and which is that commercial space on the first floor, some either condos or apartments on the second floor to really create that mixed income neighborhood. So as soon as COVID-19 started to affect all the businesses, 3CDC had to analyze how can we help our tenants. And many of you may have heard about what we're doing, but just to review that, we have worked on forgoing 3 months of either rent for retailers or deferred rent. And that is, we've done that by working with our lenders, creating loan concessions to either defer principal and interest or just principal. And then we have also cut our management fees and used our assets that we've developed into those entities to cover that gap. We've also been working on the Cincy card connection. So we have raised over $750,000 within that program. And in total, 280 vendors, whether it's been retails, restaurant, vendors have all benefited from that program. So it's really had an opportunity to touch both businesses in the Central Business District and Over the Rhine. And just recently, we've worked very closely with city administration and DOTE on the outdoor dining program, which implements barricades within previous parking spaces to create the restaurant's additional area to expand to meet those social distancing requirements. So far, we've had over 20 restaurants capitalize in that space. This is an example. This is Pepe and Dolores, and then also Bakersfield. Pepe and Dolores has benefited from an entire street closure, where Bakersfield has the parking space blocked. So upcoming projects, something else that we knew that we had to focus on was what are our 2020 projects? And these are projects that we've had in our pipeline, but as soon as COVID started to happen, we knew that these projects had to be a priority to make sure that both our GCs, our architects, and our subcontracting community would be able to depend on 3CDC to produce some future work coming this summer. So the FOUNDRY, which was formerly Fountain Place, you can go to the next slide. We purchased, actually I have one slide ahead. So the program that we're proposing, if you can just go back one more slide, that'd be great. The program that we're proposing both focuses on Fountain Square, Court Street Corridor, and Northern OTR. And you can see the stats below, but we believe it's going to bring 700 construction jobs, 1.6 acres of civic space, new office space, along with street commercial space and housing units. So next slide. We're also calling this building back better. I wasn't supposed to emphasize on that too much because we haven't actually rolled it out yet, but that's what we're calling this entire program. So you can see here the Wilkeman project, Court Street South, and the Foundry, and where they are outlined within Central Business District and OTR. You can go to the next slide. So the Foundry. So we purchased this in early 2019. We've been spending time with brokers, architects, engineers, trying to figure out exactly what we're going to do with this property. We are now in a position to start moving forward. If you can go to the next slide, you can see the renderings here. It's going to be all first floor commercial space and office spaces above. Next slide. You can see this Fifth and Race. The office space, we were originally looking at one major office tenant. We are now starting to focus more on individual office tenants within the property, and we're rolling out as our first phase our facade rehab, which you could see in the previous slides. You can go to the next slide. So first phase one, we completed all the concrete cleanup, the demolition of the escalators, interior walls, and just getting the project back to their original concrete structure. After that, we're now working on the facade replacement, and we're starting to focus on coming up with those designs and getting that bid out, and that's going to be our first phase of the project. Once we get done with the facade, then we'll start with the HVAC, electric, and tenant improvements. We can go to the next slide. I'm trying to keep it exciting. I know today I was like stressed out, like what do I wear? But I realized I can just have jeans on, right? So Court Street renovation, next slide. So this project we started with the city as a strategic task force. We are now to the point where we are going to start moving forward. We are creating 1.63 acres of civic space. The whole layout of Court Street from Walnut to Vine Street is being reworked. It's going to be one lane each direction and one lane of parking. And then the sidewalks on either side of the property, whether it be on the Kroger corporate office building or next to A-Rolls, is going to be anywhere from 30 to 40 feet. So we'll have lots of expanded area for programming and outside dining. We also, 3CDC owns several properties on that portion of Court Street, which we're going to renovate the first floor commercial spaces and do 16 units above. So that way we'll really be able to capitalize on that additional outside dining. This is just the development map. You can see in yellow what's completed, green, which is what is actively under development, and blue, which is under construction. These are some photos of Court Street. Many of you know the condition. The pavers are coming up. If you can go to the next slide. The middle median is a major trip hazard. We've tried to do some temporary fixes. Those were not planned for long-term, just more for safety. And this is what the new development will look like. So we're very excited about what this is going to be able to offer to the Central Business District. This is looking from Walnut. And then the next slide shows this transformer station how we're going to make this beautiful by dropping in some trees and creating an outdoor dining area. So Court Street Plaza, we're currently working on the construction documents. We are working on selecting a construction manager. Within a few months, that construction manager will likely go out to bid and solicit bids for the projects. And then we're hoping to get started in early September with a spring completion date. And then similar for the Court Street South construction, we're looking at a summer of 2021 completion. Welcome in. This is an affordable housing project that we're working closely with Model. It's 163 residential units. It's a scattered site, so it's all within Over the Rhine. You can see the different quadrants and different colors. It's probably one of our more complicated financings that we've pulled together. You know, we have experience with every one of these types of financings, but this is the first time that we've done every one of these within one project. In fact, today I was talking to our development manager on this project, and she told me that she has 14 construction contingencies to manage on this project. So she's going to have a lot of work cut out for herself. We can go to the next slide. This is the map. This also shows what's been completed in Over the Rhine. Next slide, please. And these are the renderings. There's 3 buildings that are infills, which is great to bring to Over the Rhine. And then several of the buildings on the next slides will just be completely renovated. As I mentioned, we're working on getting the permits issued. Model Construction is doing some selective bidding. They've bid the process. They continue to work on the budgets. They're working to improve additional participation between MBE and WBE, and then the job creation here is also significant. So in total, we hope to get $126 million worth of construction started by the end of 2020. And I know that during these difficult times and COVID, hopefully that'll impact our city in great ways. So thank you. That's what I have for today. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Brandy. It's really great to be here today. I do appreciate the invitation. Alvin, Jennifer, Erica, thank you very much. We had a little run through yesterday, and you know, I still kind of chuckle at the fact that people still have a perception that the port runs the port, and that we are active on the river and in moving cargo, and we are not. So we did try to change our name, if anyone remembers that, a couple of years ago, and it did not work. So we are still the port, and we have nothing to do with the port. So
you can tell it was me. It's okay.
Yeah. So I will say that, you know, port authorities in Ohio, just for a little bit of nerdy kind of education, they were born out of the maritime industry, but they are economic development, real estate development, finance agencies. So the craft really is in finance and in real estate development, and that's where we sit. We do have some partners throughout the state of Ohio that focus in maritime, our Toledo port, and some of the other ones more northernly certainly are active in that space, but that doesn't necessarily make it so for us. So next slide. So with that said, I wanted to take a little bit of time to run through some of the key segments of the port's business. And I'm going to really dig into the industrial revitalization business line here in a little bit. That's where we'll have our focus. I personally have been with the port for, going on 10 years. My entire career with the Port Authority has been in industrial revitalization, or brownfield redevelopment is what it's been traditionally called. And our other business lines, I think many of you have intersected. Similarly to Brandy, it's great to see some familiar faces. Many of you we work with, and if I don't work with you directly, I think there are several of you interfacing with our neighborhoods and our public finance work. So our neighborhood revitalization work is really focused in disinvested neighborhoods. I think out of the foreclosure crisis particularly, and over the course of time, we've seen a number of our neighborhoods throughout Hamilton County not realize some of the same progressive investment or change over the course of these years. So we have really dialed into some of these neighborhoods to try and offer stabilization in residential real estate, or in some instances demolition. Some of, unfortunately, while we have beautiful architecture in a lot of our neighborhoods, some of them really haven't withstood the test of time, and we've had to exercise some of our demolition in the neighborhoods. But some of the focus neighborhoods we're in that you might be familiar with or have seen the Port's work is Evanston, Bond Hill, Price Hill, Walnut Hills, and so we're very active there. And at the bottom of the screen, we did make note and wanted to include some of the Port's managed entities. So while the Port Authority is its own organization, we have about 30 employees, we also do act on behalf of 3 other organizations in our community as kind of executive staff, if you will, for lack of a better phrase. And one of those is our land bank. So the Hamilton County Land Bank, for those of you that may or may not be familiar with it, is its own organization, has its own board of directors, and we act as staff in administering the land bank, which is truly just land banking real estate and blighted, properties for disposition in a strategy that puts the property back into productive use. So that ends up being a vehicle for the Port Authority in a lot of ways. So a lot of our work comes through there. The HERC, which is the Homesteading and Urban Redevelopment Corporation, is another way that we invest in neighborhoods via home sales and trying to kind of revamp, I think, an entity that has been with the community for some time. So we took over, for lack of a better term, the HERC a few years ago, and many of you that know Deborah Robb in our office, she manages this for us on our behalf, but it's an integral part of our neighborhood revitalization strategy. I will also just make note that inside of the neighborhood bucket, we do have a commercial focus. So oftentimes what we've tried to do is create an integrated approach across all of our work for the Port to be most impactful. So while we have neighborhood residential, we also have neighborhood business district. Some of the work you might be most familiar with is inside of Bond Hill and the Bond Hill Business District, and working to pivot some pieces of real estate, stabilize or introduce other opportunities for a business district in one of our communities. So working to tie all of those elements together, and even still trying to do that with our industrial work as well, which we can touch on in a little bit. Public finance might be where Brandy and I intersect the most, our organizations. For many of you that are familiar with our public finance projects, oh my gosh, we're in a variety of capital stacks. One of the age-old, and although at this point dated, projects, as an example, was the structured lease, which is where the Port owns a piece of real estate in exchange for our sales tax exemption, and that was an instrumental mechanism for Great American Tower. So some of these public finance tools are often used as to close the gaps in capital stacks. So we're also in the FC Cincinnati capital stack for the stadium. We're in the Kroger deal with 3CDC. We help 3CDC on some of their parking assets, I believe. So Brandy can correct anything wrong I'm saying. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background on those. The last entity that we do manage, and it does come out of our industrial business line, is the foreign trade zone. So when I first started managing the foreign trade zone personally, this was probably 5 years ago, and someone was like, that's so great, we finally got a foreign trade zone. I'm like, well, Cincinnati's actually had a foreign trade zone since 1979, but it's been very under the radar. It is widely in use by a number of our manufacturers, and I think even given some of our conversation around imports and tariffs here in the recent couple of years, foreign trade zones certainly have been taking to the top of lists for companies to how to better insulate their business and lower their cost of importing and being more competitive in the global market. So that does also sit as one of our strategic relationships with the Port Authority. So next slide. So I wanted to offer this just quickly. I think hopefully a number of these names on our organizational chart will be familiar to you. I just wanted to offer this as a follow-up to do a quick jot down of a name or a person. If any of our business lines are of interest to you, any number of my colleagues, including myself, our president and CEO, Laura Brunner, will be happy to talk any more about that. But just wanted to share a little snippet into our team, and this group is way smarter than I am. So going into the industrial revitalization business line, really we are founded in basically acquiring and turning over highly impacted real estate. And we focus in the industrial real estate group on real estate assets of scale. So we do try and target real estate that can either be assembled or in its kind of entirety is at least 10 acres. Most of our inventory is at 20 acres or larger on a parcel by parcel basis. But we invest in capital stacks that are intended to collapse and take significant losses. That's in large part because what we aim to acquire really should be real estate that the private sector wouldn't necessarily ever pursue, nor should they pursue. And we have some good examples here in the slide deck. The basis of our industrial strategy is founded in manufacturing, and that is really because of, on the right side of the screen, when we say why manufacturing, it's really intended to be the greatest stabilizer in our local economic base, that we have a jobs multiplier larger than any other industry, and we reach further into our local economy by being able to engage workforce with a wider skill set and wider variety of educational backgrounds. So in the wage, actually, I think on average, at least what we're targeting and what we're seeing is around 65,000 from, your more technicians up to your CEO. We kind of average about that. We work very, very closely with Ready Cincinnati. We test our data. We have very aspirational goals that people think we're crazy to have, but why not be crazy? We'll do our best to get there. But this is founded on data. We studied and benchmarked a number of communities throughout the nation who have industrial revitalization, economic development strategies, and there are a few. There are very few. Some communities take an approach of zoning and policy. We've taken an approach of investing millions of dollars into creating our own real estate inventory, and we're early on to do that. Our goal here in the middle of the screen is 500 acres. One of our crazy goals is that we think we can do, 16 jobs per developable acre. We've seen some benchmark cities as low as 9, some as high as 21. We felt like the middle was good. That's probably the real reason why we're at that number, but it's definitely good to be aspirational. But in some of this average salary data, it does translate into a potential payroll for the region of 565 million. But one of the other key segments that differentiates us is that as a public entity, public ownership becomes really important. Our return on investment metrics are very different, naturally, of the private sector, and they should be. So I kind of already alluded to capital stacks that can collapse. So we do try and build our projects with a wide variety of funding and leveraging, being able to leverage other partners and bring resources and attention into the region. Next slide. So this is some of our existing portfolio. Some of you may or may be aware of some of these. I think Seymour Industrial Site, we are working on way better names, but this was the former Cincinnati Gardens. I think that's probably the most notable one in the inventory. We have had some really good and early success. We're grateful to our partnership with Messer and Terex. They went at risk in their partnership with the port to go into vertical construction. I believe it's like a 75,000 square foot industrial building. So you do see that at the Seymour intersection, vertical and now the ground. We're really excited and grateful for that. The 19 acres is divisible, so we do have inventory available there. And the 56-acre Cincinnati Center Point, this is maybe the debut of the name. We were calling it 2100 Section Road, Gibson greeting card. I mean, I swear the port is creative, but I am not. So we had to rename this. And so this is the former Gibson greeting card. It's 56 acres of pad-ready real estate. It's probably one of the largest properties available in the 275 belt loop that has been de-risked and has all of its kind of library of information to back it up, which in site selection is really, really important. We get tested constantly on the data and the kind of certification, if you will, of a piece of property that will meet a manufacturing or industrial standard. At the very bottom is one of the newest in the inventory. This is the former Dow Chemical Plant in Reading, Ohio. We purchased this in November, and this really is a testament to the port's passion and our mission to repurpose encumbered real estate. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Dow Chemical as an entity, but this site in particular still continues to be highly contaminated. Dow Chemical is still very much at the table and in the conversation, but this is a specialty property. The capital stack to bring this to a pad ready position is trending around $7.5 to $8 million, which is a lot when you think just to introduce a piece of pad ready real estate into the market. So we're working through the capital plan here. We always welcome, partners and brainstorming. I think a lot of you here on this call see a lot of different projects, and we welcome your counsel, honestly, on a lot of these. But this is new. It will take us a while to really be strategic in how we capital plan around this property and ensure that the remedial pathway can be as good as it possibly can be. The biggest culprit here on this property is groundwater contamination, and then second to that is probably some mercury contaminated soil. But these are the things we love, and so we'll continue to work through those. We are finalizing an acquisition of approximately 40 acres in Evendale, and that will come on hopefully into the portfolio by the end of this month. Also, again, the capital stack around that, which would be made up of grants, public financing, is also trending at close to 7 or 8 million to make that property active again. So next slide. So one of the other pieces that the port does get into, and it's really that intersection of a lot of our business lines when we have our public finance, and then obviously, inside of our just industrial group, a lot of the images you see here is not industrial real estate, where we do pull though from the expertise in this particular business line for holding certain types of real estate until they reach a place of redevelopment. Obviously, one maybe of most note and more recent, in the news would be the Millennium Hotel. We did acquire the Millennium in February and continue to evaluate the asset for redevelopment. That is an ongoing conversation with many, many stakeholders, and a lot of thought given to the right direction and the right time for this. I think that, like many of our projects, there's a lot of other things happening in the world that we're incredibly sensitive to at the moment, but work here is still ongoing. We are in the process of evaluating the asbestos position. We did a full destructive asbestos survey, which will be complete this week. And we're still working through more of our strategic contractual conversations with the building. So while it may just look like it's sitting tidy and quiet, there really is still a lot of conversation and activity around the property. We also manage and or own a number of parking assets downtown. And so we do plan capital improvements to those. We do partner with the city of Cincinnati and again with 3CDC on some of those assets as well. And then 435 Elm, which may be better known as Convention Place Mall, also is considered a strategic asset. It's a downtown key piece of real estate. We work very closely with 3CDC on the evaluation. That this is what they do. They have a lot of great expertise to lend to us and in partnership. But these have just been some key pieces that we've picked up primarily through the port's ability to finance a lot of the deals. So again, that integration of our business lines that we see active and in play. But the public finance tools that were brought to bear on these particular projects have been really the catalyst for the port's involvement, I think would be maybe a fair way to describe that. Next slide. One other, I guess, key element or I guess two other key elements for our industrial business line is third-party project management. We recognize that we have partners in our community that are focused on doing what they do, and they do it really well. And the last thing they want to deal with is a piece of contaminated real estate or demolition or any number of facets that's not their focus, but might be a strategic piece of real estate for them. They will contract with the port and invite us into a conversation to either manage on their behalf or counsel them through a project, which we do. So the project on the left, 343 Burnett Avenue, was a former gas station. Shockingly contaminated. We've been actually trying to remediate the property for almost 2 years. That might be, I probably could have made better decisions around that, but it's been surprisingly been a real hurdle to get through, but it's been, obviously it's located close to Children's Hospital and really, really important to the development of that neighborhood. Another example is the former Hudipole Brewery. We did demolish the property, sadly. It's an iconic piece of our brewery heritage, but as you can see in that picture, was in really, really bad shape, had already been partially demolished, and triggered an action, which we actually invited the US EPA into our project, but it triggered a cleanup action by the federal EPA of about 1.5 million. We had tested the property multiple times throughout quarters of, over a series of years, and asbestos particulate was emanating off of the property boundary the whole time because the partial demolition of a prior owner. So our environmental stewardship becomes really important, that we try and create a plan, work with our regulatory partners, and move the property into its next milestone, although it might take some time and some creativity and some risk. Inviting the EPA to sit down and evaluate what you're doing can be a little dicey at times, but it worked out really well here for us. So as maybe in your relationships or your communities, as you're thinking about how the port can engage or be supportive of any number of projects, we do not only look at our own inventory, but we do try and help communities evaluate their own. Next slide. So one of the things we've been asked to do was, talk to how our strategies around COVID. One of the things that have been really, really, really important to the port is that where we can, in all of the real estate projects that I just described, is do our best to keep them moving, keep people employed, keep projects through our public finance, pipeline, and supporting to make sure that they get to where they need to be. One of the things that we also would have an expectation is that there could be fallout, continue to see, impact on real estate, that if the destination of a parcel can be a public agency or public entity to ensure its proper disposition, we want to make sure that we are ready to address those and work through that, navigate, those may be specific issues with any of our neighborhoods. Also, there's a lot of conversation I think we see around, the future reshoring of manufacturing back to the US. And so we have a full expectation that industrial real estate will become more valuable and more important than maybe it has been in quite some time. So we want to be in a position of readiness for that. So our investments around industrial real estate do continue. Although we are working to, naturally be sensitive to the needs of our communities first. But this is where we've tried to just stay focused and really dialed in, not in only advancing our projects, but ensuring that those in our very specific neighborhoods continue. Next slide. And I wanted to also touch on, in all of our business lines, every single one from neighborhood to commercial, industrial, public finance, the port is dedicated to, and we have been for years, economic inclusion. We have board mandated goals that are shown on the screen that we do require companies and development partners that are wanting to work with the port. We impose these on our own real estate. We impose these also on our own portfolio to be as aggressive as we possibly can be in achieving these goals. And we don't always hit them. And I think that's a great ongoing conversation, but it's an absolute, it's a requirement. I think we have some of our partners on here who we've hammered before, and they do really well. And when we're falling short, we try and strategize and get these numbers right. But it is worth mentioning that it's important to the port as an organization. It has become paramount to our board of directors, and they do ask, and they do have expectation of us as staff and as the organization to monitor monthly reporting, to have written inclusion plans, to press on these goals constantly. So there are many times, I'm sure I'm a broken record to some of our development team, and in the field, but it's really important, worth mentioning, that this is of really high importance to us in each of our business lines, but also our organization. Next slide. And so just really a quick snapshot of how to work with us. We broke it into just really the big buckets of neighborhood and industrial. So in addition to the organizational chart, here's some real ways to reach people. Chris Meyer is our industrial development manager, and that's kind of a snippet of the work that we get into. So if there's anything appealing to you in those big buckets, if there's something here that you haven't seen or you have questions about, we're always happy to entertain that. I will say, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so I will say, and you can leave that there, but I will say that in the industrial business line, one of the things that we do is we ask for pre-qualification. So we send pre-qualifications out to all of our partners wanting to do work with the port every January. It's an open rolling thing, so we can send this out every time, but it's a matter of just structure. We send these out every January. We have different sizes of contractors who can pre-qualify for certain kinds of work. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can, understanding that there's not one size fits all. So for anyone interested in becoming pre-qualified for the industrial work of the Port Authority or anything in our strategic assets, please reach out to me. Really, it's a pretty standard, probably a lot of information you already have available to you, but it's just something that we try to be engaged with and understand our partners, and they understand our expectations. But that's a process I wanted to make mention of here. So with that, I have nothing else, and we'll open it or turn it back to Erica or Alvin or Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And actually, Brandy, I'm probably speaking for everyone that joined us today. It's just so good to hear some positive information, things going on in the city. You know, a lot of us aren't wanting to spend very much time on social media these days. You know, I wrote down a couple words, you know, transformation, bringing jobs to Cincinnati, bringing manufacturing back to Cincinnati. I was so excited looking at all the development just outside of OTR, even in that central business district. Kind of a recent empty nester. I keep saying, oh, I think I need to live downtown and be really cool. So it just keeps getting cooler. You know, and then I look at all the places that the port's working on. I'm born and raised in Cincinnati and have driven by all those places my whole life. And so to just see that maybe it's not going to be the same, but revitalized in all parts of Cincinnati, I think is fantastic. So pretty exciting stuff. So just my 2 cents worth. You know, and I know we have questions going on in the chat room. So I think Erica's going to maybe address those. And I don't know from there if you're going to open the floor up or how you want to handle that, Erica.
Yeah, Al, was there anything that you wanted to add before we get into the question and answer portion?
I just want to say how informative it was and how enlightening it was to hear all these things that you're doing. I had no idea that all that stuff was on the agenda right now. And it's just kind of exciting to see it all kind of turning over and being real positive for the city of Cincinnati. I know I had sent you a question earlier and I can mention it now. I just was wondering if any of these protests have affected any of your projects. Have there been any damages to, I mean, since you have so many properties down in those areas, I'm just more curious about that than anything.
Well, I think I can go ahead and start. So we have not had any active projects damaged. Most of our construction projects have continued, but there has been over 30 storefronts and damage to different commercial spaces between the central business district and over the Rhine. So it's been pretty widespread. Fortunately, a lot of that damage happened on the first few nights and has calmed down now, but that's what we've seen so far. I don't know, Melissa, have you seen anything on your properties?
You know, interestingly enough, I think we maybe had a residential, you know, impact in real estate, but you know, I'll be really honest. You know, the port has just tried to remain focused on our coworkers and our community at this time. And you know, we will, from the pure real estate lens, you know, we've been fortunate. We have not, but I think our sensitivity still lies with where there has been impact. You know, how can we be helpful in any of the structures or, you know, stabilization? But we have not experienced it, I don't believe, very directly through the real estate perspective.
I've been very fortunate too. We do a lot of stuff downtown and we've only had one call. So I don't know where they're all going, but I hope it stays this way. Thank you.
All right, so we do have a couple of questions that came through. Melissa, I'm going to start with you. I did not know the port tried to change its name at one point. Out of pure curiosity, what was it? What you tried to change to?
So our formal name is the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority. We tried to outdo that by saying the port, what was it? The Greater Cincinnati Redevelopment Authority. So you know, we associate our work with redevelopment, and which is true. I mean, and we thought that was more fitting for the type of work that we do. But, you know, people would say it once, the, you know, redevelopment authority, and then they would just say the port every time after. So we cried uncle and said, okay, we're done, fine, we're the port, we'll stay the port. And so now you just see us as the port. But we did try. Now we just make fun of it and all the effort that went into it, but.
Yeah, well, I always laugh here at ACI because, you know, ACI, when really it's Allied Construction Industries. And like when you have to write the whole thing out, you're like, God,
Right.
ACI. Like, I get it. So out of, again, just kind of pure curiosity for both of you, you guys have both been with the companies for a while or for quite a while. And we're kind of interested on looking back at your whole portfolio. What would you find is your most, which project do you find that you're most proud about, or that it was your favorite project that you guys have ever done?
That's a good question. All of them. I'm supposed to love them all.
That's the trick. You love them all.
I will say, I just have to say, and this is going to be kind of a, you know, I don't know, maybe a weenie answer, but I really do. Every single one of our industrial projects anyway are all very different, different. They introduce different challenges. You know, Dow Chemical, as I'd mentioned, is really specialty from an environmental perspective. Other projects have been challenging from an access or topography or, you know, the wetlands or whatever it might be. So I'm grateful for the constant, you know, just diversity of project and the challenging complexity of thought that I get to do still yet every day. I will say I also get to learn from phenomenal people. I am not a finance person at all. And so to sit next to Todd Castellini and just tiff and bond something, this and that, like it's great. I mean, it's really, really great. So I don't know. I do love them all for different reasons, and I can't. None of them really jump out at any specific point. I mean, I guess Section Road or the Cincinnati Center Point was our first inaugural demolition site preparation, full-scale industrial strategy debut of a project. So that one really kicked off what we hope to be a legacy impact, you know, in the community. So maybe that one, maybe just for that reason, that one's special to me.
Brandy?
Yeah, I'm going to respond similar to Melissa, is that I've had so many opportunities to work on so many wonderful projects. It is very hard to choose which one is my favorite. I think what stands out to me is really just the relationships that I build on the projects and the ownership. You know, oftentimes we act as an owner's representative and getting to work with the owners direct, as well as the GCs and the subcontractors, and building that relationship. I've had an opportunity to work on the YMCA of Greater Cincinnati, the Homeless to Homes projects, where we renovated all the shelters, Fourth and Race, which is one of my current projects. So it's just, it's really, really hard to pick. I think each project has its unique challenges, and the people is what really sets the projects out for me.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Melissa, this one is for you specifically. And I know you spoke a little bit about the Millennium Hotel. There's kind of a three-part question for you about that. And that is, I know things are ever changing, but the actual question was, what is the current plan on the Millennium Hotel site? And then it goes into the likelihood of work on that site spurring extensive convention center work. And then in your dream scenario, what is your dream scenario, and what is your best guess on what will happen?
Oh my gosh. You know, I was like, I know I'm not getting out of here without a Millennium question. I knew
And
it.
funny enough, the individual that said that was like, she's prepared. She's going to be prepared for it.
Well, you know, and it's a great ongoing question. You know, I'll be obviously just really as open and transparent as I can be. I think you might have to walk me through some of those again, Erica, but the first
Absolutely.
one was what is the plan?
The current plan, yes.
You know, the current plan, the current plans, if you will, have always been the replacement of a convention hotel and or the replacement of a convention hotel with the expanded convention center. So those have always been the two options on the table, I think. Both of them still continue to be vetted. I think the one thing that certainly has had impact is, you know, there's been a lot of financial modeling around either. There's a lot of community participation that would have to be involved in that decision. The capital stack between the both of them are pretty significantly different and have different needs and different requirements. The pandemic certainly changed things in that we are also incredibly sensitive to most all of our hotels in the city are currently also vacant. Running around to say we're introducing another hotel is a little tone deaf. There are some, so we are acknowledging some of that movement. So I will say both of those are still on the table. Neither have been ruled out for any reason. I think that once the market, the big global market, continues to hopefully go back into a position of being a little more stable and predictable, we will have to look at that financial modeling again. So that's really kind of the two options. They remain, to be quite frank. I think that if I had a wish list, if I had a personal preference, I think that for me, I don't know if I think it should be one thing or another, to be really honest. I think that Cincinnati, for the first time in a really long time, has one shot to do this and to do it well and to do it right and to do what's appropriate in size and scale and intention for what is good for our city. The port is not going to make that decision, of course, in a vacuum. But there's a lot to be said for that. So if ultimately for now today, that is just only a convention hotel, then we'll pursue the right partner for that. Our convention space, I think it has been talked about for some time, needs updating, it needs expansion, it needs to be more competitive in the environments that we see nationally and in our benchmark communities. So still striving for that, whatever that looks like. So I know this is kind of still that fluid, not intending to be a non-answer, it's just there's still a lot of things not answered. And what was there was a third question, Erica?
I think you kind of answered.
Did I get them all?
All of them, yeah, because there's not really, you can't really answer what's the best guess because it's still so fluid, like you're saying. So, so in the meantime, we're trying to obviously be intentional and sensitive, to when that full re-engagement. I know that Laura Brenner, our CEO, is still in regular communication with a number of our stakeholders. She's, I think, meets possibly weekly still with the county administration just for updates and where we are. Just keeping as much momentum as we can in the moment. So that's probably my best answer. Perfect. Brandy, we're going to start with you on the next one. This is actually for both of you. But the ever popular crystal ball question. The stock market has been pretty resilient and overall positive since late March. Based on your experience and expertise, what do you expect to see for the development activity or interest in the last 2 quarters of 2020 and of course into 2021? How does that compare to pre-COVID projections?
Good question.
Yeah.
You go first, Brandy.
Yeah. Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, that's tough. I mean, as much as we can do, 3CDC is going to do everything that we can possibly do to continue to push projects, hopefully bid projects out and get subcontractors and GCs to the table and have them doing work. But I think at some point you also have to be realistic that COVID is probably going to affect the last 2 quarters of 2020. I think people are still apprehensive. I know, we have a lot of small businesses in Over the Rhine, both minority, women-owned businesses that have been affected. And, you just have to somewhat be a realist and say, like, how are they going to continue to do? Are they going to be able to, reopen their doors and strive for success like they have been previously? So I'm hopeful that it only affects 2020, but I don't think that really any of us know at this point. So.
Yeah, I think I would add to that I'm always going to cheerlead for industrial real estate, but I think industrial real estate will see an uptick. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to become more paramount that some of our resources are a little bit closer to home. So we have a full expectation that we'll work with Ready Cincinnati and Jobs Ohio to be in the best position we can. I'm a big believer in that. I'm not an economist, but that's where I would probably put my money if you want to say it that way. you know, I'm not a real estate broker agent. I have some curiosities around the office market for sure. I think we're all saying that. One place we've seen the impact on the port's inventory is in our parking assets. I mean, parking revenue is way down. I think we're all getting checks from our insurance giving us money back. Thank you, Alvin. Like, because we're not driving. I don't know. I mean, I got something. I didn't even know what it was, but so I think that's curious. I will just also comment that Todd Castellini, our VP of Public Finance, we were talking earlier this week, and he was saying that his pipeline is starting to mushroom. And I think that's a really great, you know, reading of the tea leaves or possibly an indicator. The portfolio inside of that is very varying. So it can be from, you know, any number type of projects that we would get into, but the fact that, you know, we're starting to see some more movement or some of that, what we may have been constricting before, the hesitation might be letting up a little bit. So I think that hopefully it won't be as lingering into next year as we would think, but I think a lot of it depends on if the pandemic continues through the fall. I think that'll be the real, you know, tell sign of what happens.
Absolutely. Well, that is, unless someone pops up with a little question, a last minute question, that is all we have today. Al, what checks are you guys sending out, and where, and can I get some of that too, please?
Just call, let me know.
Safe driver premium refund.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of people's sales are down too, so they'll be getting some checks back at the end of the year, but we're hoping that changes. And heck, the stock market today was 500 plus, so hopefully everybody's business picks up the same way and everything gets back to normal, and Jenny can go out and get her drinks again at the restaurants. And
Exactly.
Sleepy Bee Cafe.
Well, thank you everyone for joining. I'm really glad we did this, and you know, just excited to hear everyone's voices. And Randy, Melissa, you guys did fantastic. That was a great presentation.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. Very good.
Yeah. I thank you, Jen and Alvin. Thank you so much. I have had a blast working with you guys on this. It's definitely, usually it's like, okay, we sign up a sponsor and I'll see you the day of, but it's been a lot of fun working with you guys. Melissa, Brandy, you and your teams, you are fantastic. You guys have all been amazing, and I've really, really enjoyed working with all of you. I do want to also thank Mary Timmons, who's on in the background running the slideshow today. We are recording it, so we will go ahead and be able to send that out to all the participants who are on and also who weren't able to make it today. As oh no, I already went over that. So I already covered that part. Just again, thank you all to our members that are on here today. Thank you. I miss you all. I cannot wait to see you guys in person when it's safe to do so. I know ACI is, we're ready. It gets a little lonely in these halls without you guys. And Melissa, Brandy, all of our members who are downtown, please stay safe. We hope that things clean up a little bit here soon, and to our police and fire down there and everything. So thank you guys for your time today. That's all I have, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day.